Oksana, first I wanted to ask you, what was your journey to the IZOLYATSIA Foundation? Because as I understood from the keynote talk earlier, you initially had more technical rather than cultural background.
For me, it was maybe unexpected a little. So I was working on factory, and at that time I was director of a factory, and all my thoughts was how to run the factory and not a lot of even time for real life. I know Lída Mykhailova, who is the founder of IZOLYATSIA, and she asked me several times to help with, for instance, Oksana, can you find the best proposal for 90 tons of salt and 90 tons of coal for, for the installation? Because it is a big amount, special fractions, like special dimensions should be. And for me it was, and my background is that I could find a lot of needed things, etc., because for factory you need to be very creative. And of course, I have the support by my teams in the factory, in purchasing department, who can help me with some advice. And so for me, at that time, it was like how to find this salt and mine. And for me, it was a question: for what such amount? Like, what can you do with so many salt and so many coal? And on this exhibition with Zajíčková, Misha presented, you can see that people were all the floor. One half of the installation room was with salt, and the second with coal. And all this big amount was used only for the floor, like decoration. And for me, it was a question: why, for what? Like when I saw how it was used, and then I found at that time I found a situation that if you can make the salary of your workers higher, people can come to another factory. And in the city, it was Gorlivka. In the city, we had two factories. My factory where I was, and the neighbor factory, which are like in a very, we were contacting even in a place. And workers were like, they were coming from our factory to the neighbor if they could pay for even €1 more. And if we needed this specialist bag, we paid a little more, we increased a little more salary, and then they came back. And it was several times they saw waves. And then we understood with our financing department that we are on a top, that we couldn't make the salaries more. And then it was a question how to stop people to come out from our factory, and how to bring a new value to people to stay with us. And then at that time, I was already with IZOLYATSIA, and then we were like discussing with IZOLYATSIA team and artists. Maybe we need to bring to arrange like some touring for our workers to IZOLYATSIA. IZOLYATSIA, it was like 50 kilometers from our factory, and we decided to invest in that program, to rent the buses and to provide the people, our workers, the opportunity for free, take their families and at special time come to our buses and make a touring to IZOLYATSIA for culture events. And first time I see the eyes of people that IZOLYATSIA was like very prominent at that time, and nowhere you can find such program or such modern culture, or even such culture at all. And for people, it was like a new understanding what they can see or achieve, like additional to their work, and it was became very popular among our workers. And we took from two of our facilities sites all people in different times. And after we even stopped all this touring from our side, they became to come themselves. And so at that time, I understood that, yes, you can invest in some art installation, for instance, a lot of salt and coal, but you win much more. And yes, for me, it was at that time a decision that it is important.
The social aspect of art and culture is crucial for IZOLYATSIA. Now I see it was like that since the very beginning.
So my part was only some kind of advice, some kind of like maybe support, but not so big role. I was like most observer in a lot of cases, but Misha at that time already was a part of the team.
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, the art and culture in general is a tool for working with people. So, when we have different partners organization, but when people are making, like white cube and hanging stuff there, I mean, this is nice. It also can work on different levels, but you want to have this maximum output of it, to have concrete results from any encounter of people with contemporary culture. There is not an organization, maybe it's not interesting, but there is another really big, well-known institution in Kiev called Pinchuk Art Center, which belongs to really rich businessman who built this really big gallery in the really center of Kiev, and he will bring Paul McCartney, he will bring Anish Kapoor, Jeff Koons, this crazy, extremely expensive artists. And in one hand, it's good that people have an opportunity to see them, but then on the other hand, you don't see immediate result, what the idea, how it works with people. Do they understand what's going on there, or they just see it because it's fancy and they leave and there is no trace? So for us, this aspect is really important. This is why we work with this.
Has war somehow shifted this perspective? Did you maybe find some new aspects of culture and art that you haven't focused on as much before? I understand the social aspect of your work is still very prominent, but I was thinking if maybe the war revealed new layers of it.
Was very used in bombing shelters to to give a kind of resilience to all people who were under big stress, and especially for children, because it was only one way to shift the attraction from hearing is new bomb fallen already or not. And even there are special programs in shelters, especially for kids, and then and already for adults, like a kind of art therapy. And now we have a lot of big demand on mental health. And it's not about that. It's only about how to support people in different stages of their life to survive. And as I already told, that being for just now, the culture became more requested, and not so-called high culture like Misha in Pinchuk Art Center, that it is extra expensive, extra fine art, but performative art and all kind of art which is participatory. This is of a big request, and the new sense of art and new additional value is that kids especially and young people, they can see in the art and creative industries just now their future. They understand that they can use these tools, they can use this for their professional development, because as you see, industrial life is killed for many, many years. Of course, it will be renovation, reconstruction, but this is not for a new generation who is just after university, because for this new start, you need to have a lot of professionals for the very beginning, and it will be especially in the first 1-2 years. And then, of course, young generation will come to industrial and etc. But on the start, we need more experienced who can even start some factory from scratch, from zero, without a lot of investment, because you can be very great having a lot of money. But because I know this, because the factory I was working was renovated in such a way. They had not a lot of investment from the very beginning. They began from most zero, and then when they became some kind of payment for their work, they can reinvest this into infrastructure of the facility. So, and the same I prognose, or I assume, this my money will be for all the infrastructure in Ukraine, because unfortunately we will have not a lot of not enough investments, and it is not impossible to renovate all the destroyed infrastructure, especially schools, culture of houses, etc., etc. During 1 year, it is impossible, and people need to think how to work. And for youth, just now, culture will be one of the tools how not to
Lose?
How not to lose themselves.
Well, I think there are two important parts of it, maybe even more. But for years we have been trying to develop this direction of creative industries, creative businesses, creative jobs for young people, especially because industry is in decline, and wanted them to find new opportunities, especially that working in Ukraine, providing services to on a global market can be really good thing for but you're living in, let's say, in Berdyansk, which is a small city in the south of Ukraine, and you're working with New York, for example, as a designer, and this difference in salaries that people have there is huge, and it's a great opportunity for young people from that perspective. So I really do hope that this situation and the whole shift in economy of Ukraine will enforce that, and also new connections, because there's a lot of young people who are now abroad, who are working abroad, building new connections, learning languages, learning new working culture, and this should be really beneficial, of course, in future. And we really hope to look forward to this future to come. But it's absolutely agree with Oksana that as the war started, we see that this social aspect became even much more important. For example, we don't have our space right now. It's we are not organizing physical events in Kiev, but our other partners, they're turning their cultural centers into this kind of social centers for everything that you can do with internally displaced people. For example, our friends from Dnipro Center for Contemporary Culture, they are operating in the former, let's say, administrative building from Russian Empire, like from 19th century. And when we spoke to them in February, in March, they didn't know what to do with the building. Like it's not good as a shelter, it's not good as a hostel. But then a couple of months later, they have this whole full-scale center for internally displaced people, for children. They're doing educational programs. They are doing business programs to support displaced businesses. They're doing art residencies for local people. They use their exhibition space to talk about the war, to reflect on what's going on there. So, this brings you a lot of opportunity to work with. And you see that your work is getting more important by every day.
That brings me to the next question. You said earlier during the keynotes talk that the position of an artist in Ukraine is quite difficult, that people often don't see art as a real job. Do you think this is changing more so now that art and culture are gaining a new status during the war?
It's been getting better since 2014 at least. So this stories that I was talking about is like before 2014, basically like 2010, 2014. But since then, situation changed dramatically due to different reasons. One of them is that there is a lot of educational programs, there is a lot of visibility, festivals, contests. Like you see that illustrators' work is used everywhere. Artists, like in general, performing arts, everything has become really important and recognized by people.
Yes, and at that time, like it was since 2018 already, for Ukrainian culture sector, erased a lot of opportunities how to be supported, because you can be a super great artist, but you need some resources. And at that time, the Ukrainian Culture Foundation was established to give and it is a state institution for giving funds for culture sector. Then, and they had even special stipends for artists, and especially for emergency artists who are without not a lot of experience or on the beginning of their career.
Yeah.
And then House of Europe. House of Europe then came, and a lot of other
Yeah,
programs.
but for example, during COVID, we were talking to people from different countries, and suddenly you understood that situation in Ukraine is pretty good. Ukrainian Culture Foundation will give infrastructural support grants that you don't need to do anything. You just do whatever you do in your normal life. You say, we are going to do this next 3 months, and they would give you money for that. There would be international support coming from, Goethe Institute, British Council. This is what House of Europe. This is kind of joint organization run by those international funds. So there was quite a lot of support if you wanted to do something. Of course, you need to know how to apply, how to write a project, how to present yourself. This is, to have a portfolio. This is important knowledge everywhere, obviously. But, all of a sudden, basically in 2020, 2021, we understood that our situation is really good. And we also saw that a lot of countries around Ukraine, like Moldova, for example, Georgia, Belarus, they were looking at Ukraine and what we have achieved in the last couple of years with, of course, as an example. So this is really good. Of course, there are problems. There is no status of artists, for example, like it's in some countries. Yeah.
A question of taxation.
Yes. But I mean, it's good to start, especially keeping in mind that 10 years ago it was just a dream of a couple of cultural managers, but no one cared about it in general.
Well, has it become more difficult to justify the funds to the cultural sector during war? all the important infrastructure of Ukraine is being destroyed, so I can imagine other areas have to be prioritized when it comes to the state support.
Like comparing how much investments are going on humanitarian support, or even not on infrastructural, but on very strategic organization like electricity suppliers or water suppliers. Like sometimes there is kind of support and still significant one, but not so big like for energetic sector or water supply sector, because without this people will even not survive. There is support for house restoration, for instance, for windows or for roofs, because people need to live somewhere. And of course, the costs invested into infrastructure and all these things and into culture, you even can't compare. Culture is just now on a mostly last interest, because there are a lot of other points for which should be covered. For instance, educational sector, it is extra of importance, because it's not only like kids in kindergarten, there are kids in schools and there are youth in institutes. And this is a big problem, because during the COVID, a lot of educational system was moved to online, and the level is dropped down. And now during the war, even if you have a school and it is not destroyed, sometimes kids and youth can come to these facilities, because if in any minute there is the air attack and your school or institute has no bomb shelter, nobody will take this decision that you need to come. And if you have no possibility for coming to the shelter, from this point of view, a lot of schools are still going online, and universities as well. And this needs a lot of support and investments, how to make the educational situation on a much more better level, because COVID make its result and the war make it even worse. And now you need to think how to change the sharing of materials, even so ordinary thing like access to the book. If a lot of because a lot of books are destroyed, damaged, destroyed, and you can't get this from the library, and you need the access for your school needs. So even for my kids, it was a big question how to make, and parents who has one in a class, one, for instance, one special book, they make a photo and shared in between the class. And but this is not the point what should be arranged by parents. It should be on a state level. And I know that they're preparing like special, like educational portal when you can download special educational books, etc. And of course, if you need culture, it's great. We are from culture sector. For us, this is extra of important. But from the state level, they need to cover much more sectors, and that's why we have some state support, or for just now the international support to the culture sector, each is more significant than from our state level. And this is what I believe another country understand much better, even than all people except the culture sector, that if you will not help to survive the culture sector, then it will be much worse situation. That's why I guess that European Commission and other countries, they give support to Ukrainian culture sector, because if it will be destroyed to the total. Yeah, because yes, of course, maybe we can imagine that Ukrainian artists can survive outside of Ukraine, but if we will to get them back, they need to have some ways where to come back.
The mention of the constant bombing threats leads me to my last question. How do you cope with the uncertainty of war, with the horrible awareness that anything you build can be shattered in a matter of moments?
We work our asses out. This is probably the best way from 2014. When our place was East in Donetsk, we immediately started working, doing stuff like organizing press conferences, talking to international media, organizing protests in Kiev, because I also wanted local, like Ukrainian authorities to pay attention that, there are museums, there is stuff that is lost, and we also need to take care of that. So we basically had no time to reflect on that. And then, we thought, okay, we need to do something. So we started started programming in the East on the Ukrainian controlled territories. So, for us, this is the way, we are just, we are trying not to think too much about it, but to think what we can do and how we can be useful in this situation.
And this is the same even on a personal level, because otherwise, too much trauma, too much tragedy. So, if you feel that you can do something useful on a personal level, on an institutional level, that is what gives you sense and what gives you strength to move forward, not to stop, not to give up.
Thank you so much for this interview.